Oh boy, so we're talking about a New York Rangers team that had just come off of a third round appearance in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Sure, they lost to the inevitable runner-ups in the Stanley Cup Finals, the Tampa Bay Lightning, but the fact that the Rangers were even in the third round in the first place, that was a pretty big deal. This is a team that is coming off a goaltending performance from Shesterkin that was so good that it garnered him Hart consideration. He won the Vezina Trophy, and it was pretty unanimous that he was going to be the guy to win that. And in the postseason, you really did see the resurgence of Igor after a pretty slow start against the Pittsburgh Penguins earlier on. However, when it comes to this New York Rangers team, even though they kind of overachieved in 21-22, even though they made it past where everybody thought they were going to be able to make it in this year's run, we still have ourselves a conversation that is a pretty negative one regarding probably the best forward on the team in terms of pure skill and talent. Let's talk today about Artemi Panarin, because when it comes to the 30-year-old, 5'11", 168 pounds as a right-handed player, he's a guy making $11.6 million a year till the end of 2026 with a no-move clause. This season, Panarin put up phenomenal numbers. It's his second 90-point year. He had 96 points in 75 games played, and 74 assists on top of that as well. He also was just under a point per game in the playoffs with 16 points in 20 total games, but when it comes to his performance in the postseason, sure, even though the numbers are pretty good, 16 points, 20 games is not bad in the slightest, there will be a lot of Rangers fans that will kind of creep into the conversation if you discuss Artemi Panarin and say things like, yeah, even though the numbers were great, this guy didn't play out too well. This guy was disappointing on some nights, and this guy, I mean, sure, he had multi-point games and he had point streaks, etc., but you never really saw Panarin play at that top gear level that you kind of got used to seeing him achieve over the past few seasons in certain segments of this year's playoffs. And it appears that that sentiment has carried over not just from the fan base, but also to management as well. This is a recent piece done on The Athletic by Arthur Staple. The link will be in the description below if you want to go ahead and read it. The Rangers off-season roster decisions, who stays and who goes, from 5 days ago, June 23rd. Again, because The Athletic is paid for material, we're not going to go ahead and screenshot this. We're going over onto Spectre's Hockey on June 24th. This is what is written about on this free website summarizing the Athletic piece. Is there a rift developing between Panarin and the Rangers GM Chris Drury? Arthur Staple raised some eyebrows in his roundup article of off-season decisions facing the New York Rangers. What drew considerable attention was his report, citing that two league sources claimed GM Chris Drury was vocally unhappy with Artemi Panarin's performance in the 2022 playoffs. Panarin had 16 points in 20 playoff games, but he was not as consistent as hoped for. Despite the 30-year-old's hefty contract, Staples speculated that Panarin could request a trade if there is a rift developing with him and Drury. Now, it's kind of funny, because after this article was published, I believe we did a stream within the next day or two, talking about the Stanley Cup Finals and everything, and some people in my chat were saying like, hey, Lego, what do you think about the Panarin trade rumors? Panarin's going to get traded, or Panarin might request a trade. And I kind of looked at that at face value, and I was like, okay, no, Panarin's not going to get traded, guys. Are you kidding me? But now, I see the source. This right here is the article where everything got started. And when it comes to things that I think hockey teams would probably not like to get leaked to the media, the GM being upset and unhappy with your star player's performance in the playoffs is probably not one of those things. Spectre's note goes over this in a little bit more detail. He says, it'll be interesting to see what the reaction will be to this report. Panarin or Drury could ignore the story and issue public denials. I'm curious as to what the Rangers and NHL insiders have to say about this story too. A number of NHL clubs would be interested in Panarin if he became available in the trade market. As Staple pointed out, his contract is near impossible to move, though. He's signed through 25-26 with an AAV of $11.6 million and a full NMC. It was Drury's predecessor who signed Panarin as well, so that means that Drury does not have to feel any loyalty towards players that were brought in before he took over as GM. Drury also clashed last fall with Vitaly Kravtsov after the winger declined demotion to the minors. He spent this season in the KHL and became the subject of trade speculation. The two sides seemed to bury the hatchet when Kravtsov agreed to a one-year $875,000 contract, but that has not kept him out of the rumor mill. And so, for Artemi Panarin, obviously, Panarin is not the same as Kravtsov. I mean, they're both Russian. I mean, they're both wingers, but, like, the magnitude and the caliber of players there, completely different, right? And so, for Panarin, it is kind of noteworthy to understand where they're coming from here. Because even if you look at some of the responses to this idea that Drury is just kind of unhappy with Panarin and his performance, here's a tweet on Twitter from Mason. No, everyone was unhappy about Panarin's play this postseason, including Panarin himself. Now, as I said, it's easy to look at Panarin's game log and say, hey, guess what? Against the Pittsburgh Penguins, the guy had a 3-point game in game number 2, he registered points in 3 straight games after, and he had the game winner in overtime in game 7. What's there not to like about this guy? The fact is, Artemi Panarin has a gear that just allows him to completely take over a shift when he really wants to. It's just in this year's postseason, you saw so many errant passes, so many pucks that died on his stick. Sure, he would get the points because once in a while he would make a play that wasn't boneheaded and it actually would have ended up in the net. But Artemi Panarin, for all intents and purposes, just did not look like Artemi Panarin this postseason. And it's kind of wild to say because he still was under a point per game. Even in the Tampa Bay series, I mean, the guy had a goal and an assist in Game 1. He had 2 assists in Game 3. He added a goal in Game 4 when they ended up losing. But in the last 2 games, you saw Panarin go pointless. Also, the team only scored 1 goal in each of those 2 games, so it's kind of tough to get points when your team is not producing. But it's kind of the difference in, I guess, visualization here, because for Mika Zibanejad and Adam Fox, you could definitely see that these guys were making their teams so much better. Chris Kreider had a few opportunities here and there that also were kind of noteworthy, and then of course you had Igor Shesterkin standing on his head for a lot of these playoff games as well. For Artemi Panarin, you didn't really have that same offensive catalyzation that you had gotten accustomed to seeing out of these other players like Mika, like Adam Fox, like, heck, the Philip Cheadle line. Like, that line actually went out there and produced so much, and you could see so much positive energy radiating from their play that it was difficult to ignore. Panarin, unfortunately, did not have that same pizzazz, yet he's the guy making $11 million. And so hearing that apparently the upper management is kind of frustrated with how he played, it makes sense to me. Just think about this New York Rangers team and how good they were already playing to get to the 3rd round, and then think, what if Panarin was just as good as Panarin could have been? Did they only score 3 goals in the final 3 games of the series combined against Tampa? I don't know. When it comes to the sentiment of him potentially requesting a trade, though, I think we are in a very preliminary part of this story to even consider that as a possibility here. There's going to have to be a few more reports coming out over the next few weeks talking about whether or not there's a rift here, whether or not Chris Drury is not just vocally unhappy with Panarin, but he also is willing to trade this guy, whatever. And besides, vocally unhappy, I mean, you could think of that as a pretty big thing, but at the end of the day, maybe if Chris Drury just says once, oh, look at that Panarin guy, hey, what a bum. Oh, we need more out of Panarin. Oh, man, come on, Panarin, you could do better than that. If you can just say something like that, and 1 or 2 executives go out there and hear it, they could call up Arthur Staple and be like, yeah, no, he's vocally unhappy. He was expressing his frustration with the guy. Maybe that's all there is to it. Maybe Chris Drury does still think of Panarin as an $11 million caliber player and that he'll keep him around. Who really knows? You can talk in the comments, though, all your thoughts about Artemi Panarin and this entire situation here about the Drury party not really liking him and his services in the postseason. Do you agree that he was disappointing in the playoffs this year? I personally had been watching most of the games and just seeing the Rangers fans' reactions to all of their players. It was kind of evident in my mind that Panarin wasn't really performing to his standard, but the comment section exists for a reason. Talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about this situation. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.